Today I have the sixth fairy tale for you that I'm writing from the stories that you are sending me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the pinned video on TikTok and Instagram, or if you're on YouTube, go to the playlist Why Is Love So Hard and check out the first video that I posted there. Today's fairy tale is titled Hope and Dave. Let's begin. It was her 21st birthday, and Hope was feeling elated and even a bit wild. She decided to go for a drive with her friend, and because she was excited about her upcoming celebrations, she played the music a bit too loud and could not help but dance in her seat as she drove. There was quite a bit of traffic, so cars were moving rather slowly. And from the corner of her eye, she saw two guys in the car next to her, looking towards her and smiling. Usually, she did not engage with anyone in another car. She always felt she had to give off the air of haughtiness and controlled calm. God forbid anyone would think of her as an easy catch. But that day was her 21st birthday, and she felt she needed to commemorate it with something different. So she waved at the guys in the other car, and they sparked into action, driving up close to her window and starting up a conversation. But traffic decided to move a bit faster at that moment, and the guy next to her told her to give him her number. She reached for her notebook on the back seat, tore out a page, wrote down her name and number, and nearly crashed as she was passing the paper over to the other car. Hope and her friend were giggling throughout, and then the phone rang. She could still see the two guys in the car in front of her, and the one in the passenger seat who was calling her cell phone was halfway in the back seat, looking at her, waiting for her to pick up. His name was Dave, and he said he'd love to take her out for a drink if she were free that night. Hope told him that it was her birthday and that she couldn't make it that night, so they decided to have a call the following week to set up the date. Now, after all was said and done, Hope began worrying about what he thought of her. So when Dave called a few days later, Hope suggested they go to a cafe in the afternoon. The cafe she chose was far from her house. She didn't know Dave after all, and she told him that she'd meet him there. That way, she did not have to see him for more than an hour if she didn't like him. They met at the cafe and it was awkward. All the carefree joy of the day they'd met had gone. They were both serious, maybe too serious, and the conversation did not flow at all. Hope had a carrot juice, Dave had a coffee, and Hope thought that if Dave were generous enough, he might order them something to eat, maybe a dessert at least. But that did not happen, and Hope came from a family where each gathering was marked by heaploads of food, and she took that as a red flag. Then the bill came, and Hope, who was a big tipper, wanted to see how much Dave would leave for a tip. When the change was returned to him, and it was change that was a fairly good tip in Hope's opinion, Dave made to put in his pocket. But upon seeing Hope looking at him expectantly, he put the change back on the tray and called the server holding the tray out, and of course the change fell out to the floor and more awkwardness ensued. For Hope, that was a second red flag. They parted ways, and she knew he was not going to call her again. So imagine her surprise when Hope saw Dave's number flashing on her phone 4 weeks later. Frowning, she picked up the phone and spoke to him politely. But all politeness went out the window when Dave asked her if she'd like to join him and his friends on a weekend in a cabin in the mountains, meaning that she would have to sleep over a night or two as well. She saw red, the gall of the guy. "How many girls did you ask to go with you before you asked me?" she said. Silence. "You don't talk to me for a whole month, and after a 1-hour date 4 weeks ago, you find it all right to give me a booty call?" Silence. "Your silence speaks volumes, Dave. Don't call me again." And she hung up. The end. Well, again, that's the first ending. Let's go to the second one. After getting her number and briefly talking to her, Dave was on tenterhooks. He wanted to call her immediately the next day, but he forced himself to wait. He was so looking forward to meeting this carefree, confident girl who lit up the world with her joy and her smile. Day two passed and he still held back. On day three, he called. When Hope suggested they meet at a cafe in the afternoon, he was crushed. But he said, I believe first dates should be memorable, so allow me to take you out to dinner. If you don't like me, you can simply tell me and I'll drive you back home. Hope was intrigued by this man who refused to treat her anything less than a lady, so she accepted his dinner invitation for Friday night. Dave picked her up at 8 p.m. He knocked on her door, gave her flowers, held her arm as she went down the stairs in heels, and opened the car door for her. Wow, Hope thought. So far, so good. When they arrived at the French restaurant, he opened the car door for her and helped her out of the car. He put his hand at her lower back and guided her to the restaurant doors, which she opened as he ushered her in. They sat at a round center table, and Dave ordered a bottle of wine after asking her if she preferred red or white. Dave waited for Hope to choose an appetizer and a main dish, and then he added to her order several dishes to share, he said. It's a shame to come here and not try their foie gras, their oysters, or their quiche, or their escargots. And don't get me started on their confit de canard and their tartare de bœuf. And you have to keep space for the cheese plate and their millefeuille and profiterole. And she laughed. Dinner ended up being a marvelous affair, a 4-hour affair. Conversation flowed seamlessly like the wine. Hope found out they had a lot in common, and what was not in common was discussed with interest, without judgment, without beratement. It was definitely a new experience for Hope, who was used to men listening only enough to form their own argument or to belittle what she was saying. On the drive back home, Dave took her hand in his and just held it. He walked her up to her door when they arrived at her place and kissed the back of her hand and thanked her for a lovely evening. He called her the next day and set up a second date for the following weekend. The end. I hope you enjoyed this fairy tale, and I hope you will keep on sending me your stories so I can turn them into beautiful fairy tales like these. I am Dada, and this is the series Why is Love So Hard?